green finance starts with very good intentions, but it's sitting on very naive assumptions.
Hello and welcome to the Circularists. And today I'm delighted to be talking with Pierre Lenders, who is a financier. And we'll talk about how we're going to get to where we need to be. So Pierre, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So Pierre, I've done that brief introduction. Would you take the reins and expand on that? Tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and what your vision is.
Yeah, no, you were spot on in terms of the resume. You look at the resume, investment banking, fund of hedge funds, hedge fund now. So I'm the typical expression of the pure capitalist guy. Although underneath, probably because of my education, my father is a pastor, my mother was a teacher. So I've always had values that were not exactly the ones that are, often associated with finance. And for the last 12 years, I've been very passionate about trying to reconcile, short-term goals of finance, which is to make money, with the obligation, frankly, to continue to have a planet going forward for most of us.
Right. Wonderful summary. So let's kick off then, Pierre, because we've had a little bit of a preamble and we've acknowledged, and I think it's becoming more widely vocalized, things are worse than we thought they would be at this point in time.
Yes, and if I may illustrate with an image, you can probably see this image with the video. It's the images of, those cartoon where a coyote is pursuing some foe and he's running, but at some point he doesn't realize that he's run off the cliff and is already meters away from safety. And I think as civilization, we've done a bit the same. We only now start to realize how damaged the planet is from all sorts of angles. I mean, it's not just climate change, as you know, it's the 9 planetary boundaries.
Right.
6 of them have been crossed already, probably putting us in a place where if we were a few millions, probably we could survive. With many billions, it's going to be a hard journey. Can
you tell us about green finance and what your thoughts are on how finance can facilitate the salvation of humanity?
Yeah, well, the very short answer is that finance alone certainly won't fix it. That it would be very naive to think that finance can pursue something that doesn't coincide with its well-entrenched purpose, which is to make money. And I think there's been an illusion that built during the years 2015 to 2021 because of a number of circumstances that I can eventually delve into, but where suddenly more and more people jumped on the bandwagon of green finance. I mean, they decided to decarbonize their portfolio, to buy the green stocks, to buy well-rated stocks using criteria that are supposedly non-financial. Mm-hmm. And because everybody was going from not having done that to starting to do a lot of it, that had an impact on the prices of those companies that they were all picking up.
Right.
And therefore, it created an illusion of performance. It created the illusion that by being a good guy, you would make money. And so more people jumped on the bandwagon, not claiming that they wanted to make more money, of course, but claiming they were also joining the club of people who wanted to be responsible.
Right.
Now, the problem is if you have that as the only engine for your decision to observe that it worked financially, you are almost certain that this will end up in tears, that will be a bubble.
Yes.
As soon as you've exhausted the ability of that overperformance just coming from financial flows going towards the same stock, the phenomena completely reverse. And you had a perfect illustration of that as Mr. Putin invaded Ukraine, and suddenly gas became much more expensive and oil became more expensive, and oil and gas companies were suddenly having a fantastic time in terms of cash flow. And all those investors had shunned those type of companies from their portfolio, they were sort of forced back in.
Forced back in for how?
Into buying oil and gas companies. Because you cannot stay away from the well-performing part of the economy if you are in finance for very long. Because even if you are attached to your moral conviction that you should not encourage oil and gas exploring and drilling and producing, if you underperform your peers for 2, 3, 4 years in a row, you're out of the market anyway. All your investors will leave you, and it will be in vain. So that's what I'm trying to say. Green finance starts with very good intentions, but it's sitting on very naive assumptions.
What would you change and how? To align finance with our needs as humanity?
Yeah. Well, I think it starts with an introspection, really, having a proper theory of change. In agriculture, in mobility, I mean, we had our president saying, "I love the car, you know, j'aime la bagnole." I mean, and there is a highway that is being built in France right now, which is completely, you know, goes completely at the opposite of what needs to be done. We want to encourage people to use bikes and buses and trains. So if you don't address the demand side and only focus on the supply side, the only thing that will happen is that the same quantity of oil anyway will be extracted from the ground and burnt, and it will be no change in terms of the climate change. But it's just that the trade balance of the Netherlands or France will be deteriorated further.
Yeah, let's chat about a colossal drop in demand that will suppress the use of fossil fuels. Let's just look at that as a scenario. GDP is as a measure of the health of a nation, right? So GDP says go out and shop. And if you do that, and if you enter into this consumerist gluttony, our economy will be healthy. How, if somehow we could get into the minds of the masses and everyone pulled back from this idea that consumption is great, what would happen to jobs, and how would you turn and rebalance that so that there is work and people can live and livelihoods could be protected? How does that rebalancing occur? This is something that just I can't answer, but maybe you can.
Look, you asked me about jobs and what happens with jobs if we promote sobriety. We'll be poorer, right? Well, two answers to that. First, yeah, in a way, we'll be poorer. We'll have less money to spend on buying things we don't really need and that destroy our habitat and deprive our kids from their future. What's wrong with that? Unlike misery, sobriety is a voluntary reduction in spending and wasting. Second, let's stop fooling ourselves about how critical we are in producing what we consume. You know, it's the machines who do all the heavy liftings, and they don't get paid a salary. So far, they've replaced human legs and human arms, but now they replace brains. Economists who fail to see this don't understand the matter at hand. We could almost go to the beach, so to speak, or devote more time for emotionally and socially fulfilling experiences. It's a political question. What we do with the fact we could absolutely think about jobs in a completely different way. I can only, suggest that we remember maybe somewhere deep in our brain, our ancestors before this whole obsession with building stuff and owning stuff and consuming stuff started. For those of us who were lucky enough not to have been eaten by a lion when we were a baby, we had a fantastic life. We would work a few hours a day. I mean, work meaning you go and look for the food in the forest, or you do some handcraft, or then the rest of the time is chilling out and being with the family, with the kids, with your friends. I mean, sometimes there were battles, probably, but that was never really brutal because you didn't have a pyramid, a social pyramid. You didn't have a big hierarchy, And so I think finance, to go back to green finance, misses it completely because in a way there is a conflict of interest. If you think of it, you're managing a fund, your income is coming from the commission you take, which are directly proportionate to the amount of the size of the portfolio. And the size of the portfolio goes up when markets go up. So the higher the GDP, the higher the stock market, the higher the fund, and the higher commission. So there's sort of a conflict of interest here.
Yes.
Unless you're a hedge fund. So hedge funds don't care because they can short and they can, a market that goes down is not necessarily a bad news. But so there is this lack of in-depth thinking about theory of change. We think that asking corporate to change their behavior or their products will change the world without realizing that the problem is us as consumer. And so I think the finance people who claim they want to improve, chances to have a livable planet going forward should tackle this and should realize they should spend much more energy engaged with governments. Why is it that only citizens take governments to court? Why wouldn't financiers also take governments to court together with citizens, saying, guys, you're not complying with your commitment?
Right. From what the impression I'm getting from what you're saying is that there's enormous power that rests with the citizen to abstain, to change their value system, and to just not buy into this. My self-worth equals the number of products in my closet. Are you saying that it should start there with ordinary citizens just having a change of heart and mind?
Yes, and I would say this differently. I say unless this happens, I'm very pessimistic. So we need to find ways for this to happen. So to go back to your question, those who have most power at the moment, they don't want citizens to start thinking about, do I really need those many items in my closet? I think there was one extremely interesting experience, which was run in France a few years ago, was a citizen assembly. But they were given the opportunity to not only have free croissant and cafe, but also to listen to experts and to deliberate.
This sounds fascinating. How did it go?
Because to finish answering your question about how did it go, so it went very well in the sense that they came up with hundreds of more proposals.
Feeling excitement at the possibility. So this pilot of the Citizens Assembly is so encouraging that with education and with conversation, they found, you said they became militant, they started to care, they understood and they cared and they responded. So this is a model that really, I think we should urgently replicate everywhere.
I think so, absolutely.
I draw so much hope and encouragement from that pilot that you've described in France.
Because what some of us want is very different from what others want. And let's face it, that's going to be the main driving force. So the most likely scenario is a very bad scenario from here. So there's urgency in derailing that train.
Do you believe this train will be derailed?
I don't care having an answer to this question. I think you have to try.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel so encouraged by so much of what we've touched on in this conversation. And I think the thing that's stoking my hope the most is what happened in France with this tiny citizens' assembly and the change of heart and the passion and power that is possible.
I'm very happy you're impressed by that, because I'm often surprised that it doesn't come up as the obvious tool that we have at our disposal.
Right.
To make
it's
changes.
Free, and it's powerful and free. And I think maybe the focus now should be to replicate that across the earth as quickly as possible in communities, gather, talk, educate, and then we're ready. People are ready to take action and to move.
Absolutely.
So Pierre Lenders, it's been a wonderful conversation. I think we should have some more like this. I'm very much looking forward to sharing everything that we've discussed here. So thank you for joining me on the Circularists.
Thank you very much for this and wonderful project you work on.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.